All right, let's dive into one of the most fascinating and honestly overlooked chapters in all of ancient history. We're talking about Egypt's 25th dynasty, the time of the Kushite pharaohs.
I know. It sounds pretty wild, doesn't it? But it's true. For almost a whole century, a line of kings from the south held the throne of Egypt. And here's the kicker. Their story isn't about some foreign invasion, it's about a massive, profound restoration.
So where did these rulers come from? Well, take a look here. They came from the powerful kingdom of Kush, down in a region called Nubia, what we now know is modern-day Sudan. Kush was Egypt's neighbor to the south, and they both shared the absolute lifeblood of the region, the Nile River.
So, to really get how these southern kings ended up on the throne, you first have to understand what was going on in Egypt at the time. And to put it mildly, the kingdom was an absolute mess.
Yeah, the golden age of the great empire, that was long gone. By the 8th century BCE, Egypt was totally fragmented. You had all these local rulers, different foreign groups, all fighting for a piece of the pie. The pharaoh's central authority had just crumbled, and that left a huge power vacuum right at the top.
And right into this chaotic scene step the kings of Kush. But here's the thing. They didn't see themselves as invaders coming to conquer. Nope. In their eyes, they were the saviors.
Now, this is super important. The Kushites were no strangers to Egyptian culture. Far from it. For centuries, they had been soaking it all up, the customs, the art, and especially the religion. They were die-hard worshippers of the Egyptian god Ammon, the one whose main temple was at Karnak, right in the heart of Egypt. And that right there, that's the key to this whole story. From their point of view, the Egyptians had completely lost their way. So these Kushite kings truly believed it was their sacred mission to march north, bring Upper and Lower Egypt back together, and restore all the old-school values and religious devotion that had made the kingdom so great in the first place. And guess what? They actually did it. Around 744 BCE, a king named Pa led his armies right up the Nile and conquered that fractured Egypt. The pharaohs who came after him, like Shabaka, locked down that rule, and the whole dynasty hit its absolute peak under the legendary pharaoh Taharqa. Let's talk about Pa for a second, the guy who started it all. If you read his own records, which are literally carved in stone, he doesn't talk about his campaign like a military conquest. He describes it as a holy war, a mission to cleanse the temples and bring back the proper way to worship the gods. Okay, so they're in power. Now what? What do these Kushite pharaohs actually do? Well, they kicked off what you could call a cultural renaissance, one of the most significant revivals in all of Egyptian history.
They started by pouring money and resources into fixing up crumbling temples, especially the massive Karnak complex. They ordered up statues and art that were intentionally designed to look like the classic styles from the Old and Middle Kingdoms. It was like they were trying to turn back the clock to a golden age. And on top of all that, they built their own stuff, including these really cool, steep-sided pyramids back home in Nubia.
I mean, this quote really just nails it, doesn't it? They weren't just sitting on the throne. They were actively breathing life back into a civilization that was, frankly, on its last legs. And you can see the proof of this unique period with your own eyes. Just look at the pharaoh's crown here. See that? It's got a double uraeus, 2 cobras. That was a big deal. It symbolized that he was the ruler of both Nubia and Egypt. It's the perfect symbol for this dynasty, right? Super traditional, but with their own unique twist. But of course, good times like these, well, they rarely last forever. While the Kushites were busy looking inward, fixing up Egypt, a new and terrifying power was rising just over the horizon. Enter the Assyrian Empire. And let me tell you, these guys were the polar opposite of the Kushites. We're talking about a brutal, unstoppable military machine bent on expansion. So you had the Kushites looking inward, focused on restoring the past. And then you had the Assyrians looking outward, focused on conquering everything in sight. You just know a clash is coming. And boy, did that collision happen. The Assyrian army, which was frankly better equipped and more battle-tested, just pushed and pushed relentlessly into Egypt. After some incredibly brutal fights, they managed to defeat the great Taharqa and even sacked the holy city of Thebes. By 656 BCE, it was over. The Kushite pharaohs had to retreat south, all the way back home to Nubia. Their time ruling Egypt had come to an end. So, okay, the story ends in defeat. But listen, if you just write off the 25th dynasty as some kind of brief blip in history, you'd be making a huge mistake, because their legacy, it's way more important than you think. And you might be thinking, okay, but if they lost in the end, why do they matter so much? It's a totally fair question. What was their lasting impact? Why are we even talking about them today?
Well, the answer is, their legacy is huge. First off, they put a broken Egypt back together again, ending hundreds of years of chaos. They also sparked that massive cultural revival, saving traditions that might have just disappeared otherwise. And this is so important. They forged this powerful, undeniable link between Egyptian history and the history of the rest of Africa. Plus, they left behind some absolutely incredible monuments that you can still go and see today, in both Egypt and Sudan.
So here's the bottom line, the big takeaway. The Black Pharaohs of Kush weren't just another set of foreign rulers. They were restorers. They were unifiers. You could even argue they were the last truly great pharaohs to rule in that ancient traditional way. And their story reminds us that the history of ancient Egypt is so much deeper, way more complex, and far more connected to the rest of the African continent than a lot of us were taught.